You know, if they made a sequel, like another sequel, that was like a bunch of people trying to kill him to become Santa, I'd be really into that.
Yeah. It's just like a bounty hunter going after him, trying to be Santa.
Right, that'd be interesting to me.
What if Mrs. Claus kills him? Does that mean that
Well,
she becomes Santa?
that's what I'm wondering. Like, if a woman was the one to like pick up the coat and put it on, would she turn into a man Santa, or would she just turn into a woman Santa? Like, how does this work? What is this magic? You know?
Christine Kringle.
Welcome back to the Great American Movie Review, where we review great American movies.
My name is Kyle.
And I'm Mikiah. This is a Movie of the Week style podcast where we take turns picking films and we have a casual discussion about their context and quality. The film that I have chosen for this week is none other than the Tim Allen-led The Santa Claus, which, for those who don't know, if you've never seen it, or, you know, if you're joining us after watching it, the film follows Tim Allen, who's a bad dad. He's divorced.
He's a bad dad.
He's a bad dad. Yeah. We've seen this type of movie before many times. This is a pretty tried and true formula for family fare, like Hook, for instance, or the recent Christopher Robin kind of does the same thing, where somebody's kind of lost the magic in their life, encounters a mysterious magical journey that they have to go on to regain that in their life and win over their child again.
And shenanigans ensue.
Yes, and shenanigans ensue. So in this case, he accidentally manslaughters Santa. And then, due to what is the Santa Claus, clever little play on words, he then has to become Santa because he puts on the suit, therefore fulfilling the terms of the Santa Claus. And so the movie's just him transforming into Santa Claus, and that's it. That's the whole movie, and kind of reconnecting with his son. So the film, obviously, like I said, stars Tim Allen. It came out in 1994. It was a smash hit, taking over $190 million on a $22 million budget, which, adjusted for inflation, is almost $400 million on a $45 million budget, which is crazy. Obviously, that's like a massive intake. So naturally, it had two sequels. Weirdly, I mean, it was the 90s, so they didn't make sequels as quickly back then, but 8 years later in 2002, and then a couple years after that, they made the third one. All three of these films were very successful. The second one, you know, cost a little bit more to make and didn't quite make as much. And then the third one, they reduced the budget a little bit, but they were all profitable films by
I remember watching the second and third one in theaters. So
yeah. And then there's even now, like, if you had any doubts about the fact that Disney has confidence that this thing can draw in viewership, they have their Disney Plus series that's now in its second season, which is crazy. The Santa Clauses. So that's actually like currently airing. I don't know if the second season just wrapped up or if it's still playing right now, but either way, this is now what, almost a 30-year-old franchise.
Yeah. 30 years old, 30 years old next year.
Right. Which is crazy because, I mean, I picked this movie kind of as a contrast to, we talked about Tokyo Godfathers a couple weeks ago now. And that, to us, for both of us, was like, this is what a Christmas movie should be. You know, this is everything that's really great about setting a movie with the Christmas spirit still intact, but then still making a good movie.
Christmas should be, it should still be in the setting of Christmas, but Christmas should be kind of like in the back, and the story itself should be taking center stage.
Yeah, like the story comes first versus the Christmas coming first.
Yeah, the story or the characters or both.
Yeah, so this movie kind of embodies what I've historically not liked as much about Christmas movies, so I wanted to pick it because I don't like it that much. And it kind of embodies a lot of what I don't like about holiday films, though. So, Kyle, you haven't watched this movie in a while, or at least that's what you told me.
No, not in like 20 years, probably.
Yeah, I'd seen it a couple years ago, just kind of casually on around the holidays. But what are your thoughts going back and revisiting it?
So I think it's, I remember watching this franchise and I'm just like, yeah, all right. So
It
I think I
exists.
still hold that. There's no nostalgia for me. I guess I was never really that big a fan of Tim Allen. Not that I hated him in any
No,
of his movies, but he was just kind of meh
he had his
the whole
moment
way through. He had his moment, yeah,
in the
just the one,
90s.
yeah.
In fact, he had such a moment that when this movie came out and premiered and it was number one at the box office, he had the number one movie.
It was number two, I think.
Well, it eventually it hit number one at some point. So he
Thanksgiving, I think.
at one point he had the number one movie in theaters, the number one TV show because Home Improvement was
Home
still
Improvement, yeah.
it was like in its third season or fourth season. And also he had a book out that was also number one. So the man was on top of the world for at least one weekend.
Yeah. Just one weekend. A
At
literal
least.
15 minutes. Yeah.
But
So what I'll say is looking back on it now, it's kind of hilarious that this covers divorce, breaking
right.
and entering, and child labor.
Right.
So it's kind of funny. I kind of love it for that. But so I'd say I'm higher up on it now than I was back then, but it's still kind of mostly neutral.
Yeah.
I I don't like Christmas movies either, or like what you would think of Christmas movies. So I take what I enjoy out of them, and then I just like leave the rest. I would say there's 30 minutes worth of a good movie in this,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there are some highlights, like you're pointing out. Like I do think that there's some adult humor that's fun for parents that's going to go over kids' heads. I think that's brought about by Tim Allen. I think this role serves Tim Allen pretty well, honestly. The casting of him here, it
I'd say
works.
after the first 30 minutes. I'd say
Right.
in the second act in particular, definitely. But
Right.
that first act is way too slow,
Yeah.
and that third act is way too weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's
Yeah.
not
But
really much to get behind.
yeah, he has some like comedy moments that still work even in the first part where he's like, um, he points out that he's like his wife's not here. That's why his secretary is sitting on his lap,
Yep.
and it cuts like stuff like that. There's even a line that's been cut from most releases where
He's driving home and he's like, "Oh wow, the traffic's so bad," and he's like the only car on the road,
oh yeah,
and he like
there's
he fakes an interaction with somebody in the other lane, even though there's nobody there.
oh yeah, there's a line that's actually cut from most versions of this film where he mentions a phone line sarcastically called 1-800-SPANK me.
Yep,
But apparently that actually when people tried to call that, it was an
it's
actual
an actual
like
thing.
phone sex line that
Yeah,
Disney then, after getting lots of complaints in the DVD release for it, they cut it out. So in every subsequent release outside of some digital ones nowadays, that line has been removed from the film because parents were getting like really heated about their kids calling this line.
man, it's Disney. They should have just bought out the hotline.
They did. Disney bought the
Oh, see,
hotline
there
so
you
they could
go.
shut it down. Yeah. So
No, 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 no. Keep it up. Just have it be an advertisement for your new movies or something like that.
oh yeah, but they call it and it just is like Wish now in theaters.
Yeah, they call it now. Yeah, they called it back in then, and it was like The Lion King. You should watch it.
Or it's just advertising just the Santa Claus
The
stuff. So
Santa,
it's like the
yeah,
Santa Claus is now on Disney Plus.
yeah. You, you watched the movie back then. Watch it again.
Right. So yeah, that's kind of there, but there's some like jokes here that I think like, are good for adults that kids aren't gonna get. That they're not like too bad. They're like still nice, but something that you're not gonna see in a lot of family movies nowadays. So the 90s kind of just being a product of the 90s, it has that in it, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
But yeah, there's a lot of this movie though. This is the Christmas kind of family movie where it has way too many contrivances. We talked about contrivances just kind of being baked into Christmas movies a lot of the time. And this one is like the epitome of that, from down to the basic concept. It
I'd say it's an interesting concept
Yeah.
having Santa Claus be inducted as like a legal thing.
Yeah,
But
as long as
that's
you don't think
about it.
about it too much,
No.
because it's like, okay, well, if he didn't put on the suit, then what? What if he just picked it up and threw it away? Then is Santa just dead
Yeah,
forever?
not only that, but isn't that some power struggle? That's
Right.
true to today. Like you kill the ruler and then you become that ruler. What in the Chronicles of Riddick?
You know, if they made a sequel, like another sequel that was like a bunch of people trying to kill him to become Santa, I'd be really into that.
Yeah. It's just like a bounty hunter going after him trying to be Santa.
Right, that'd be interesting to me.
What if Mrs. Claus kills him? Does that mean that
Well,
she becomes Santa?
that's what I'm wondering. Like, if a woman was the one to like pick up the coat and put it on, would she turn into a man Santa, or would she just turn into a woman Santa? Like, how does this work? What is this magic? You know?
Christine Kringle.
It also has that ultimate sin that I think is in family Christmas movies specifically, where it's like the parents don't believe in Santa, but Santa's definitely real. And I'm like, well, where do you expect these presents to be coming from? Like, what do you think happens each year? Like, I've never understood that. And I remember thinking as a kid, you know, I was never too hard on like my Santa beliefs as a child, but I did think that like if I stopped believing in Santa,
The
then
camera
maybe
just focuses on you and like a dolly zoom and it's like, hold on a second.
yeah, we had our presents from Santa, our little stocking presents, then we had the rest of the presents. And I always thought like, well, if I am like revealed explicitly that I don't believe in Santa, then maybe I'll stop getting those presents kind of thing. But it was movies like this that really kind of like made me think
That's a Pascal's wager that I'll do.
the movies like this though really made me think like why wouldn't that those questions just kind of really sparked like heavy doubts, you know? Like, I don't think he could possibly be real if these parents don't
Not
believe
only
in
that,
him.
but yeah, the parents overtly like say that he's not real because of
Right.
like logic. So if you're introducing logic into a kid's brain, which only half of it's logic, half of it's imagination and bullshit.
Logic doesn't
Yeah.
fully develop until they're 10.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
like you're not going to be able to explain that, which you do get a humorous scene out of it with Neil. Okay, so his wife, Scott
Laura.
Calvin, is Tim Allen's character's name, and yeah, his wife Laura, she's remarried to this guy Neil, played by the Honorable Judge Reinhold. Who was all over the 80s and the 90s, like just everywhere. And then he just, I don't know what, like he just kind of disappeared from major films and stuff after that. But he did show up in Arrested Development, which was great. But he's a psychiatrist and he's like, I don't know, he's trying to convince Charlie that Santa Claus isn't real, and he's like trying to explain the logic to him. How could he get to every place, you know? And I'm like, why would you do that? Like, just who cares? Let your kid believe whatever they believe, and when they stop believing, just be like, that's fine, you can stop believing too, you know? Like, but yeah, it's a weird like push for anti-Santa, which would only happen in a movie like this when you need that kind of pushback,
New
I
Christmas
guess.
movie, Anti-Santa.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Isn't that just Krampus?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, we already have that.
Krampus 2, Anti-Santa.
But yeah, but you got his son Charlie, who
Charlie,
he's
the
in charge
biggest
of.
piece of crap.
You hate
That
Charlie.
that kid is so selfish.
Oh
I
yeah,
swear.
this is one of those child performances that you got a lot more of back in like the 90s and 2000s, where they were like, just have the kid say a few cute lines, that'll be enough to like endear him to the audience. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't
there's no
blame the
character
kid.
in that.
Yeah, I don't blame the kid for being a kid, you know.
Yeah,
The
it's
kid's
not the
just a kid.
kid. It's
No,
my god.
nowadays, like we've talked a few times in some modern films, like Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and some other films too, where the child actors are genuinely great. Like, I don't see a lot of really bad child performances anymore. And I think that they just understand that there's can be more nuance in those kid roles a lot of the
Well,
times.
now hold on. There's a difference in age here. I think Charlie was like 8 and Margaret's like 14 or 15.
Okay, but look at something
So
like Room,
sure, but
like something like that. There are a lot more modern films that I think get the child performances
well,
down
I
better.
wouldn't compare Room to this necessarily. I
True.
think they're doing different things.
Right. One's a completely drama. This one's a family lighthearted
Yeah.
comedy. But either way, the kid is fine. Like, he's fine. They just have him say some cute lines and
No, the
say,
kid is fine, but the fact that The fact that he's like, I don't want to stay with dad, and then dad becomes literal Santa, and it's like, I want to stay with dad.
I only want to be with dad.
Yeah, and in the end, he literally says, "I love you, Santa Claus," instead of, "Oh, I don't know, I love you, Dad."
Right. He does say that at the end. The
Yeah,
ending of this movie, we'll get to it, but man, there's a lot of like weird things that happen in the last third of this movie that you don't really think about explicitly when you're a kid, but as an adult I'm like, that's weird. But get it before that. So he burns the, he's not a good dad. He doesn't have his Christmas dinner ready. He's late because he was at an office Christmas party and he lies about
he
it.
goes to basically IHOP with him.
He goes to Denny's. He goes, it's Denny's.
Yeah,
It's an
Denny's.
American institution, which walking in there, that's the nicest Denny's I've ever seen. And that's not even to say it's nice.
It's because
just
no one's there on Christmas Eve, dude.
like, but like there was, I lived down the street from a Denny's, like I did a few years back, and it's no longer there because it shut down.
Dude, what is up with 1994 movies and Denny's?
I don't know, man.
Because Pulp Fiction, they're at Denny's.
Right. Which looks a little bit more accurate to the Denny's experience, I think.
Well, getting robbed.
Yeah. The Denny's near me, though, it had ants. Like, that's the last time I went there. Is they just had ants crawling all over the windowsill. I'm like, this is
And
disgusting.
those ants have been there since 94.
Yeah, and we just left before even ordering because I was like, nope, not doing this. And then now it's another Mexican restaurant, which the town I live in has literally over 20 Mexican restaurants, and none of them are like great. They're all just very standard Mexican restaurants. It just is what it is. That's an American institution now, I guess.
Yeah, Tex-Mex.
Not even, just regular old, just like whatever you want to call it, but it's just standard issue Mexican restaurants that we have in this town. But yeah, so they go to Denny's and it's a bummer because they're out of everything because it's Christmas. So of course they are, and it's got to be bad experience. So there's a little funny bit though where it's like you burn the turkey and the guy lifts up his hand and it's like he has it wrapped.
Yeah, he's been injured by the turkey.
Right. So there's a couple of like cheeky little fun jokes in there that I don't think are like unwelcome, you know? But yeah, I think
Well, it is stereotype that men don't cook. So
right, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, this movie, what? You're saying this 90s comedy starring Tim Allen falls into stereotyping? Are you saying that,
Well,
Kyle?
well, yes, but also it is the director who produced Home Improvement, so you notice that he puts on the tool belt while he's
Right.
at the North
He
Pole.
does.
So it's very clearly this is just Tim Allen if he was thrown into being the Santa Claus.
Yeah, John Pasquin is the director. He's worked with Tim Allen quite a bit. It seems to be like a primary collaboration in both of their careers because John Pasquin also directed the films Jungle to Jungle and Joe Somebody with Tim Allen. He obviously was a big hand in Home Improvement and his current show Man of the House, which I don't know if that's still airing or not, but it was a big hit on, cable, which is a rare thing these days. And then he also directed Miss Congeniality too. So he's got kind of his lane and he sticks in it. And I guess that's fine, good for him. He knows what he's good at and likes to do. I guess good at is something that you can determine for yourself if you've seen any of those. They're all fine. It's basically what I would say about it.
Yeah, 90s movies are pretty hit or miss nowadays. A lot of people don't like Jumanji nowadays.
I never
I'm
liked
not even
Jumanji
joking.
that much as a kid, honestly, but it scared me, so that's why. So I haven't tried to watch it in a while.
Well,
But
I would basically follow Robin Williams to the ends of the earth, so
true.
especially back in those days. So
Yeah, but even in 1994, he had Mrs. Doubtfire, which is not. I watched that movie recently for the first time, and it's fine. Robin Williams is the thing to watch that movie for, though.
yeah,
But it's one. He's in a lot
it's
of
the
those.
same thing, dude. It's the same thing with Flubber.
Yeah, Patch Adams.
Yep.
He's a lot of those where it's like the movie is endearing because he's in it and because of his performance. But
But he also makes good movies great. Aladdin would not
Yes.
be the same without
Good Will
without
Hunting
Robin Williams.
would
Good
not
Will
be the
Hunting.
same. Yeah,
Good Morning Vietnam.
good. Yeah, he has a lot of those as well. Whatever the movie is, he's elevating it. He's making it better. But yeah, it's kind of And yeah, and a lot of his 90s comedies, I do feel like, are relying solely on his performance. I mean, you could say that, though, for a lot of people in 90s comedies. That's kind of what this movie's doing with Tim Allen, you know? It's just,
Yeah, 90s and especially like 80s action movies were big hits because of the stars at the top.
yeah.
So
You had Jim Carrey had Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, and was it Ace Ventura?
Ace
Or,
Ventura, Pet Detective.
yeah, in all this same year, 94.
Yeah,
So
he was on top of the world.
that's kind of the realm of comedy that you're dealing with, though. You get a central comedic performer to lead some sort of concept comedy, and
Yeah.
and you just roll with it. And sometimes that works really well, and sometimes it falls on its face. And I think in a situation like the Santa Claus, it just kind of is fine.
It's serviceable. Yeah.
Right? It's fine.
It got a few chuckles out of me when he's getting
Yeah.
the when he's at the doctor, he's like, "But my hair's graying," and he says, "Then dye it," and then pokes his belly and says, "And dye it."
Yeah,
is-
there are a lot of
There's a lot of
unfortunate fat
wordplay.
jokes in this. Where well, first of all, when he goes to the doctor's office and he stands on the scale and he's like, "I've gained 45 pounds in like 3 days" or something like that, and it's like he's like 192 pounds. I'm like, Tim Allen is 5'10", 5'11". That is at
Oh, no,
the
no,
upper
no.
end
No,
of the range.
it was
of
at his
average.
bathroom. It was at his bathroom where he was like
Yeah.
194, but it was like a full week later that he went to the doctor.
Oh, okay.
That's how I
then
saw
I just
that.
misinterpreted that.
I think so because I
If I
don't
didn't,
think he stepped
he's
on-
still like at the upper end of average weight. You know,
he's still
when he
probably
stands on
like
the
two.
scale.
He's still he's still at the upper weight, but also this was before like the Super Size Me like put everything on like DEFCON 5, where
Right.
everyone was worrying about weight, even though America's
It's just
still
that
more obese than
it's-
ever. So
Yeah, it's just that film thing where it's like, just, you know, we're gonna. I don't like. I believe that Tim Allen's probably like 185 pounds normally, you know, and they're like, he gained 45 pounds and he's 192. I'm no.
well, another thing
No.
as well is if he was even remotely muscular, muscle weighs more than fat.
Right.
If that weight went from muscle to fat to his belly, that absolutely makes sense why he would look so different, but only gain about like 12 pounds.
I mean, he's wearing a pretty big, substantial fat suit, though. You know,
Yeah.
like you see him with his shirt off in the doctor's office scene. It's a huge suit. That suit's probably like 60 pounds on its own. So, yeah, it's just kind of one of those things. You also get a lot
No,
of just
at
like,
the doctor, he's probably more like 250. Would be my
Yeah.
guess.
yeah, maybe, yeah. If you're right about that week passing, I may have just missed that.
Because there's
detail,
no
but
way he says I gained 45 pounds in 3 days, but he only weighed about like 150 pounds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't buy him as 150. You know,
No, not at
He's just-
5'10 and also fairly fit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but either way, there's just a lot of like fart jokes too. And that's where it's like gets into like the family comedy aspects. And it's kind of that thing of like, is this enough? You know, like, is it the fact that this movie is Christmassy? Is that the only reason we still talk about this movie?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think it's a cult classic because of Tim Allen and because of the like different idea going into the plot.
I don't think
And
this
also-
is a cult classic because this one was very successful. And
Oh, it's
has a
also
lot of
very well
fans.
loved. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just a successful film, period. And
True.
a lot of people love it and watch it every year.
I
So-
kind of attach cult classic to forgotten movies that people pick up over the years for some reason.
I know this one still gets played on television regularly, at least, you know, during the holiday season.
I mean, that's true, but every single like TBS or that they'll play everything.
Right.
They'll play every Christmas movie, whether it was successful or not. So,
True.
yeah, basically after Thanksgiving, every Christmas movie that's ever been made will be played somewhere.
Yeah.
So whether it was successful or not, but I think it's the fact that the comedy hits well for the 90s. And I mean, you were talking about the fart jokes, but this was 6 years before Shrek. So, yeah.
But Shrek is actually funny at the same time. At least parts, like a good amount of Shrek is still like actually pretty
I'd
funny.
say some of this is still pretty funny. So,
There's parts of it that are still pretty funny, but I don't know. Like the movie starts to fall apart for me the second like you start to see like the reindeer and everything. Once the concept actually gets into gear is where the movie starts to wane for me, because he gets up there. First of all, this is 1994, so I'm not going to be too hard on the special effects, except you had Jurassic Park the year before, you had Terminator 2,
Well,
you've had some advancements, and
what were the
frankly,
budgets of those? Because 22 million's pretty low for.
it is like Terminator 2, I remember being one of the first to be like $100 million budgets. So, and
Yeah,
Jurassic Park,
and
I think, was
Jurassic Park
also
was
one of those.
probably in the ballpark of that.
Yeah. So I'm not, this movie clearly had a lower budget than those films did too. I'm just saying, like, if your ambition exceeds what you're able to do, then maybe scale back your ambition a little bit, because there are so many shots in this movie of like the reindeer flying around that look so bad. And I don't, the puppetry is well done. I just don't like it. Like the big eyes on the reindeer and everything. And then they're just like, I don't know. There's a lot of farting with the reindeer for whatever reason.
I don't mind that so much as the shots of them in the sky. That is some of the
Yes.
worst CGI I've ever seen.
It's awful. Every time
it's
that they're
terrible.
flying, there's one time where they're just landing, whenever they're landing on a roof, like in those earlier scenes, it literally looks like PS2 just like sliding onto the thing. Like there's hardly any like real shadows or anything. It's weird. Like it does not look good for a kid. Sure, the kid's gonna look right over it and not even think. I actually watched the last 30 minutes of this at my in-laws' house before I watched it again for this, because they were just watching it. They just happened to be watching it. And at one point, my brother-in-law asked my nephew, he's like, "Hey, does that look real?" And my nephew went, "Yeah." So
Yeah, because it's just like their imagination,
right. He's
They
a
don't-
kid. It doesn't
They
matter.
don't know what puppets look like outside of imagination.
Right.
Like
So,
filling in the blanks.
this was one of the flying shots too. So yeah. But yeah, then it goes kind of deep into like the whole concept of it all too, once they go to the North Pole. Oh, also the shots of him going through the chimney.
Terrible.
Absolutely awful. Just like this stupid like looking rubber stretch.
What I will say plot wise, I appreciate a Christmas movie that actually bothers to like discuss, wait a second, so he goes to every single house
right.
kind of thing. I appreciate that, because every Christmas movie you'll just like skip over that. Like, logic, we can't have that here.
Right.
They at least try to explain it away. It's like a time space continuum pause.
Yeah.
Except for like the immediate area, because he can still chat with the little girl sleeping in the couch, which terrible parents. Give her a bedroom so that way Santa doesn't have to like do everything right in front of her. But
yeah, and I like the idea of like the chimney just kind of appearing, even though it looks terrible when
right,
it does.
there's a fireplace that just appears that's like fully decorated and furnished for some reason.
Yeah, it's silly, but that kind of idea honestly works for me. But
It's the most a Christmas movie has gone to like try to explain this.
Yeah.
Even though it's crap.
yeah, this movie also poses like the question of, so he kind of becomes Santa Claus whether or not he wanted to, because he picked up the suit and put it on. So how much of the change in this movie is due to him actually growing and changing versus him becoming basically possessed by the
Him being
spirit of
brainwashed,
Christmas?
yeah.
Like I don't know how much
Possessed
I
by-
buy his actual arc here, because so much of it has to do with him literally turning into a different person.
It's possible it's a little bit of both. He's finally understanding the Christmas spirit, because you kind of get that the only reason he says he likes Christmas is because he's trying to keep Charlie from like losing that spirit, but he doesn't have it himself. So he's
Yeah.
doing all this for Charlie, and also he's bonding with Charlie, so he's seeing this as an opportunity to build a relationship with his son.
Right.
I kind of see both aspects of that. But then again, it's also Tim Allen. I can't nail down exactly what the man's going for.
Yeah. Once you get to the Christmas stuff, it's cool set design. It feels a little studio lot though, which obviously this is made like as a set.
Yeah.
So to me, it kind of reminds me of something like a Disney Channel movie like Halloween Town or something, where it's like we made our one big set and we're gonna use it as well as we can within limited screen time. But it does feel like a
Maybe
big
it's just
set.
because I grew up with movies like Elf, where it just went all over the top with like the set design. But Elf had Elf specifically has very smart
Yes.
design when it comes to forced perspective with showing Will Ferrell as much larger than the elves, and also making the elves like 9-year-olds is a choice. I think forced perspective with adults would have been a little bit better, but maybe they just didn't have the money for all that.
Yeah.
But
I think something like Elf is in the exact same realm of film, a family Christmas comedy, is a much better version of something in this kind of realm
because
because I
it's
think
also that fish out of water type of thing, but this is like a
right,
reverse that. So
right,
it's a normal guy being thrust into being Santa Claus. Whereas
right.
Elf is he's starting basically as a disciple of Santa Claus, which is a hilarious sentence to say, and then he's thrown into the real world and
Right.
has to deal with the consequences of that. I
Yeah.
prefer that because it's grounding a character who is fantasy
Yeah.
based.
Fantastical character in the
Yeah,
real world
exactly.
versus the other way around.
Where it's
Yeah.
the grounded character constantly being like, "What's going on?" And it's like, "Dude, I'm understanding what's going on. You're Santa Claus now."
Yeah. Now the second half of the movie, like, kind of annoys me in this one because it gets to the point where he's like rapidly transforming into Santa and he's like the beard and everything to the point where he shaves it and it grows back immediately.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, so now the whole conflict here at this point in the film, because there's no real like villain, there's no real antagonist here. It's just the
I think they
situation.
tried to make it Neil.
A little, but
Yeah.
Neil's fine. Neil ultimately, as a person, is fine. Which I do
I
like
don't
that
know.
this
He's kind
movie.
of a dick.
I do like that this movie doesn't try to get mom and dad back together though,
Yeah,
and the
that
sequel
yeah,
kind of
that would have been
reinforces that
forced.
too. Because
Yeah.
I did put on the second one just while I was editing, so I had something on. And I was like, whatever. I already
Man, I
watched the
I
first
wouldn't
one.
yeah, I
The
wouldn't have been
second one,
able.
everything with the B plot of like the robot Santa Claus just makes me want to like gouge my eyes out.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this is so bad.
And then the
Um,
third one makes you question whether Martin Short was funny in the first place.
yeah, and then I watched
Uh,
something else with them, like Three Amigos or even like Only Murders, and I'm like, yeah, he's very funny. He's
yeah.
very funny. I saw Steve Martin and Martin Short live when they came to the Chattanooga area, and that was a lot of fun. So I'm all on board Martin Short, but
I guess it's possible that Martin Short he's not a solo act. He needs somebody to bounce off of.
maybe,
He needs a yes and a partner.
but one of the funniest parts was when he was on stage by himself. So we'll see, but or not. We'll see.
No. Please don't.
You know what I mean.
Please
Um,
don't you put that on me, Ricky Bobby.
But there's the whole custody battle thing where they're like, he's going crazy, which honestly, totally understandable. He starts turning into Santa Claus, and he really seems to be committing to this bit to an unnatural and crazy degree. But the like, if he can shave his face, I would literally be like, here, I'm going to cut my beard right in front of you right now, and I will show you that this is a magical occurrence. You know?
I, I've said this before, probably not on this podcast, but like Neil is the wrong type of person who plays with logic because
Yeah,
he's the kind where he's immovable. Whereas that's the opposite of what people who use science or logic should be. It's
yeah,
like it's like if you asked him, is there any evidence that I could show you that would change your mind? And he says no, that is the wrong kind of scientist.
right.
Because that is a person who is an ideologue or somebody who is not willing to move regardless of what you say or regardless of what you show him. So I feel like if they had put that scene in where he shaves his beard and then immediately grows back, Neil would have been like, "Nah, that's a trick."
Because of the way that, but that's like because the character's written poorly, I think.
Yeah, that's
I
what I'm
think,
saying. I'm
and
saying
like,
he's a terrible character.
and yeah, they throw in stuff like that with like the contrivances of like forcing the film to be able to go a certain way by not following the logical path. which is just kind of aggravating to me.
The
I'm like,
logical path is somebody figuring out that Santa Claus died and there's a weak leader now, and one of the elves kills the new Santa. That's the that's the movie right there.
maybe there's another clause that prevents elves from becoming
Another
Santa.
clause.
Hey, that's literally what the sequels, but that's what the second one is following through on, that there's a Mrs. Claus,
Yeah.
that he has to get a wife.
Clause is
there's
clause.
and it's on the same card. It's just you have to super magnify it. So,
Man, if a gay person becomes Santa Claus, it's like, oh man.
right? That's the kind of question that I'm talking about. If a woman picks it up, if a gay person picks it up, did they have to get a wife or else they have to stop being Santa Claus in, I guess, 8 years? Because conveniently,
Bernard
that's
just
how
looks
much.
at them and goes, "You are legally obligated to get a beard now, a literal beard and a figurative one."
Right?
Yeah.
Speaking of Bernard, David Krumholtz is out there holding this premise together in the scenes that he's in. He really is. Just trying to like explain
In true
everything.
New York fashion.
Right. He's doing a great job. And when you're a kid and you're watching this, like at least when I was a kid watching this, I always thought Bernard was like this older guy, but then watching it now, I'm like, no, he's
He
a
was
child
like
here
12
too.
or 12 to 14, I think.
I think he's like probably 14, 15. But yeah, either way, he's really in those scenes in the North Pole. He's holding this movie together by a thread, just because he's like has this
Spider-Man
kind of
Homecoming holding together the barge with two hands style.
right. He has this disdain for like having to go through this process again of explaining the Santa Claus situation.
I mean, canon, he's thousands of years old, so yeah.
right. He's probably done this a number of times. So, and then he's not in the movie a ton. He's only in that scene really, and
He's
then,
really in like 3 scenes, yeah.
yeah. Then he shows up again at the end of the movie, which Neil is making this like sandwich, or it's like a pita pocket, and all that he put in there are sprouts. Let me. I don't know.
Yeah.
He packed this thing with sprouts, and
I
then
thought it was
Bernard
lettuce
comes.
at first, but yeah, it's sprouts.
But then Bernard comes around the corner and he's holding the pita pocket and he's eating it, and it's literally just full of sprouts. And I'm like, could somebody not throw anything else in this pita pocket to make it look like real food for a minute and not
Yeah.
just like a movie prop? But it's just funny to me at this
And then
point.
he hands it to Neil and then disappears. It's like, why did you make that sandwich, dude?
Yeah, well, he tries to take a bite of it and Neil like grabs it out of his hand. The
But he
worst
just leaves
sandwich
with
ever.
it. You could have just like stolen the sandwich back and then left.
Right. Yeah, but it's one of those movies though that just real genuine communication would fix everything. Everything, if you just sat and listened to each other, would be resolved in this movie very, very quickly. Because like I said, there's no real antagonist. There's no real like true conflict here, and the conflict feels so fabricated because it's all just based on a uncommunicated, not even miscommunicated, an uncommunicated misunderstanding. So
I don't know, dude. Charlie is constantly running away to like be with Santa Claus and like causing all the problems. I think Charlie was the antagonist.
Charlie, you hate this kid.
I don't like the kid.
You're like, I wish this was a movie where where a kid died.
Yeah, both of us would have liked that then.
Yeah,
Dude, a Disney movie that's willing to kill an 8-year-old? Jeez.
no, not happening unless it's animated.
And even then,
Even then, they have to be at least 16. Shout out to Big Hero 6.
yeah.
But yeah, and okay, I will say too. So at the end of this movie, so when Charlie he's with his dad, and you got like the elves and everything, like the special task force elves and whatnot, and the police are alerted because his custody privileges and visitation rights are completely stripped from him, and so then when Charlie disappears, they have the police looking for him. And I have to say, police absolutely do not take kidnapping this seriously. Because they send out like the whole force like looking around for this kid. And I'm not even saying that. I feel like kidnapping should be taken more seriously, by the way. That's my point here is that it should be taken more seriously. But to the point where when they show up and they find him or at the house and everything, and they're arresting him, they send in like a whole SWAT team
Yeah.
And they do a police raid. They literally do a police raid with full assault rifles, and there's a sniper.
Not only that, they detain a regular Santa Claus walking down the street
Right.
too.
Yeah. I'm like, you do not need this much force for like. And then at the end of the movie, she like just is like, it's fine, and she like burns the court documents, and I'm like, you can't just burn that. You got to go through the whole
Yeah,
process here.
there's another copy on
I'm
file.
like, yeah, like DCS is already involved.
Yeah.
Like, you are not just burning that and being like, everything's fine now. I mean, obviously it's a movie and it's a family movie and everything, but
No, go off. There's no reason for the entirety of like the NYPD or whatever city
yeah,
they're in
it's insane.
to be there
Once again, the sniper. There's a sniper. Like, I don't know why. Like, it's so extreme. I don't know why. That's the kind of like stuff that happens in the third act of this movie. That's just kind of wild.
No. Think about this logically, all right? That sniper knows about the claws. He really wants to be Santa.
Oh yes, you know what? This all makes more sense now. The police is like, they've known for years.
The police have known the claws for decades.
They're like, we gotta get Santa on our side. Who's a more powerful person than Santa?
We have an
Claus?
army. We have a Santa.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, this movie made $200 million almost.
Yep.
Back in 1994.
This movie spawned a franchise. This was the origin story.
This is, like I said, this is a 30-year running franchise almost. Like, if the Santa Clauses gets a third season, then it'll officially have been an ongoing franchise for the last 30 years, which is insane. Like, how many 30-year-old franchises are there? And would you expect the Santa Claus to be one of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, no. But yeah, this movie to me, it's ultimately fine. My disdain for it, not even disdain, but my disliking for it isn't based in anything other than I feel like family movies can be better than this. I don't think you have to sacrifice your storytelling to make something whimsical. And sure, kids are going to like this fine, and even adults are going to like this fine, but it's just, I don't know. I don't understand this movie's like how much impact and appeal that it's had over time. It's just kind of wild to me.
I think that's just the low bar. Just like slasher films to me, Christmas movies for you, it's low bar that if you surpass it in any way, it could lead to a franchise.
True.
So
yeah. And frankly, with slashers, it doesn't even have to be better. It just has to make money.
Yeah. And it both made money and struck a chord with people.
It did.
Because it was different. It felt the same, but it was different.
Yeah. It was the fourth highest grossing movie of 1994, which, had movies like
Lion King was number one.
Lion King number one, Forrest Gump, True Lies, and then the Santa Claus was number 4. But to get a better sense of 94, number 5 movie was The Flintstones. So the John Goodman live action one.
We don't talk about that.
Another TV star in a broad comedy because he was on Roseanne at the time.
Yeah, that's just what they did.
Or was he? Or was Roseanne over? I don't know when that show ended.
Roseanne was in the...
It started in the late 80s, so it must have still been running at that point, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, but there's a lot better movies that came out.
No, Roseanne was 90. So 1992, before the revival, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it was definitely running then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mrs. Doubtfire, 94 is a weird year because a lot of people talk about how good like the top of the list movies are, like Pulp Fiction, like Shawshank, like The Lion King, like Quiz Show, For Weddings and a Funeral, like these really terrific films. Speed is one of the best action movies ever as far as I'm concerned. I love that movie. But then underneath it, there's a lot of slop in 94 that just kind of we don't think about as much, but man, it was successful. So
you could probably go back and find something every year. It's just that this was a very particular year, just like the 80s with like campy action movies. This was like campy action comedies or like campy
Star-led
concept
concept
comedies.
comedies were the
Yeah.
biggest thing this year for sure. So yeah, if you are just putting this on for the Christmas atmosphere of it, it does hit that well. Like the setting of it all of it uses a lot of Christmas music, just like
Yeah, the
Christmas
music's pretty
staples.
good for a Christmas movie. I'd say
Yeah,
especially for a Christmas movie, probably not for like any other type of movie. It's very easy to do Christmas music in
right.
movies.
It's like as a Christmas movie, this movie's fine, maybe even good. As like a movie compared to the broad spectrum of even just comedies, it's so average.
Yeah.
It's so average, and I don't really.
It's painfully
Yeah.
whelming.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just totally fine. So, but if you're somebody who really gets roped into the Christmas stuff and you love just the Christmas aesthetic enough that that is going to give it a boost, then this movie hits that and you'll probably like it. But if you're not somebody, then like there's really no point in watching this because it's just going to be a pretty lackluster comedy, maybe give you a few chuckles. So that's kind of my real final thoughts on it. Do you have anything
It
else you
also,
want to say about
yeah,
it?
it kind of retrospectively like makes me take a look at Tim Allen's other works and be like, okay, so he's better used as like a Buzz Lightyear. He's got his
Yeah.
moments, but if you make him center stage, it's like he's very hit or miss with his comedy.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I don't think he's not like a Robin Williams who's going to be completely elevating even bad material. He's somebody who can come into a comedy and play the role
well,
in the
I'd
way that
say
he's going to play it, in a very
I
Tim Allen way.
I'd say Tim Allen's kind of comedy requires a well written character,
Yeah.
whereas
Yes.
Robin Williams' style of comedy of references and then nonstop, just nonstop energy for about 5 minutes on a topic, kind of allows him to be either in the background or just elevate regardless of his character. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's weird that
and
Tim
even
Allen
as a
even
drama character, we said Good Will Hunting. I mean, I wouldn't
right.
call that a comedy, but
He has some
his
comedic
scenes
moments
are
in there.
fairly, yeah, his scenes are fairly comedic, and that's just Robin Williams style of comedy coming through.
Yeah.
Even though it is a
And
well written character, so that doesn't help my
right.
argument, does it?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. But either way, like
Like
I
a
would say like
Flubber, like a Mrs.
Patch
Doubtfire, or
Adams,
Patch
like
Adams, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and Tim Allen hasn't gotten a lot of well-rounded, well-written characters in his career. Which it's interesting that Disney even hired him because Disney has a pretty strict. They don't hire people who have criminal records, and Tim Allen does have a criminal
Yeah,
record.
it was like 1978 or something like that. He was arrested for smuggling cocaine on the
So
border.
yeah, Disney kind of broke their own rule
Yeah.
for that, which that's just such a weird thing about Tim Allen. That just is
No, he was a
what.
fairly efficient pack mule. They called him the Tijuana Lightyear.
Ugh.
Well, he was also arrested for DUI 4 years after this was made and in between Toy Story movies. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then
So yeah,
again, like
yeah.
DUIs especially, it's like a if you're rich and famous, doesn't matter.
Right. If you're rich and famous, it's implied that you have one.
Yeah. His first DUI, rookie.
Yeah. But yeah, do you want to move into scoring, or do you have anything else you want to talk about with the movie itself?
About the Santa Claus. No,
You're like, I'm
good.
good to move on.
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right. Well, the way we do scoring here, it's we do it the same way every time, and we have 10 categories that we'll go across, and we'll rank them either a 0 for not good, 1 for good, or 2 for great. That's a pretty lenient scoring system that we use here. That's the show's overall rating. It's not our personal ratings, but just how we do it here kind of gives us a range to kind of talk about these films in a, loose way that can be open to some form of interpretation. But yeah, first category as usual is writing.
I'm kind of in between a 0 and a weak 1.
I'm at
feel.
a 0 for writing with
Yeah,
this one.
I
Just
think that's
'cause-
fair because the themes are very formulaic with Christmas movies, obviously
Yeah.
just like family, but like the wrong kind of themes for family, especially given the way I feel about Charles. But
Charles.
yeah, the way I feel about Chuck. But
Yeah.
the plot is very poorly paced, and
Yes.
especially for a kids movie.
Yeah,
especially for a kids movie.
yeah, the specifics of the world that they've created here, which we'll talk in world building, I guess.
Right.
I I'm mixed. That's where I'm more mixed on it than the writing. I don't think the writing and the story is all that good.
Yeah.
But in the world building, which is our next category, I guess we'll just
Yeah,
move
so
into that.
zero for
Yeah.
writing.
In the world building, they have a very interesting idea, honestly. I think they kind of shoot themselves in the foot a few times by they explain some things and then they leave too many other things, like with big question marks, as we've kind of said. So on the world building end of it, that's where I'm kind of like at a in between a 0 and a weak 1.
I think it's because of the plot. This movie spends way too much time on the family aspect when it should spend more time on the Tim Allen versus the rest of the North Pole aspect. That's the interesting
Like the fish out of
little
water
bit. Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. The fish out of water
Right.
stuff, the relationship between him and Bernard and him and Judy and him and like Charlie could have been a better character. Like for some reason Charlie becomes like the mechanic of the group.
Right.
Boy's never picked up a wrench in his life, so I don't know what he's doing there. Like
Yeah.
they're thousands of years old, they should know better. But like that kind of aspect, I think Charlie would have been a better character had Charlie been like the entire time at the North Pole. Because I don't
Yeah,
like
if
the
they
dynamic that he and Tim Allen or he and his mother and I guess stepfather
yeah,
have.
because you also like I think that scene where they go to the North Pole is probably one of the better scenes, and
Yep.
I would like to see that explored more fully versus when he goes back and he's like sitting in a boardroom and he's eating hot fudge sundaes and everybody's looking at him like they're disgusted with how
And he's
gross
also
and
like, no, no,
fat he
no,
is now.
Santa can't drive a Panzer tank. What are you
Yeah,
talking? But it takes him to
yeah,
way too long to figure that out. Like he saw the storyboard the whole time of Santa in a tank, and it's only when they start talking about it explicitly.
yeah.
It's just a weird
I'm
scene.
like less people gawking at him and his physical transformation and
Yeah.
more just the actual fish out of water stuff, I think would be better.
Like it feels like if Santa were in the real world, he would give off an aura of jolliness that people would cling on to.
Yeah,
Like you see with the children trying to ask him for what they wish for Christmas. That kind of thing. Why didn't
right.
adults
I
seem to
liked that
latch onto
scene. I
that?
liked the scene where all the kids line up for him at the soccer game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it
Stuff
just
like
because
that works.
children believe in Santa and the adults don't? Because that's vague. But
Yeah, they kind of talk about like how adults lose the magic at it, like lose their belief in magic. I'm like, okay.
which is
Like,
funny
I mean,
because in the
sure.
real world, the adults are the only ones clinging to the magic for their children. The adults create the magic for the children.
Right, right. The
So
Santa Claus would not continue to be a concept
if
within
the
children
adults
alone.
didn't,
Yeah,
yeah,
if
if
they
the
didn't
adults didn't do
perpetuate it.
that. Exactly. So,
Right.
but I'm still in between a 0 and a 1. I think I like the concept enough to give it a 1.
Okay. Okay, I'll go for
I would
the
say
one.
that. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I'll go for the one because I'm kind of with you. Like, I think that there's some interesting things with the concept. I think by the time they get to the second one,
Yeah.
they strain it way too
It's
hard.
almost never in the real world.
But the second one is about in the real world as much, and because he has to go back to the real world to find a wife.
Yeah.
But then all of the stuff in the North Pole sucks because of the robot Santa Claus. And it's terrible and whatever. They just strained their concept by like adding an extra wrinkle to it that is just kind of dumb, you know. So, but the first one, it's still contained enough that I think it's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll give it a 1 just for its kind of unique concept comedy because that's what it is. So, yeah, characters
A 0.
0.
Yeah.
Scott's your best character because he's the only one who actually has any real growth in the movie,
And he's got an hour and a half worth of screen time. Man's in basically every scene.
right. And I think that there are other movies that do this same kind of thing but better, something like a Hook.
We talked
Bringing
about
back
Elf
Robin
as well.
Williams again. So
Specifically, a
talked-
Christmas movie, Elf is definitely one of the better Christmas movies for characters.
yeah, like yeah, his dad
James
is a great
Caan's characters,
character.
yeah.
James Caan's so good in Elf, you know. And once again, Elf isn't even a movie that I love. It still falls into some of the Christmas stuff that I don't love. And I've seen that movie way too many times to even feel like I ever have to watch it again. But
Yeah.
whenever I do end up seeing it at this point in time, now that I don't watch it multiple times every holiday season, um, I find it to be charming still and
Yeah, the
pretty
easiest
funny.
way to describe good Christmas movies is if they were on cable, because no one has cable anymore. If they were on cable, would you change the channel or would you just let it happen?
Yeah,
Kind of thing.
yeah,
And if you're just sitting there watching it, then it's a good Christmas movie. So
yeah,
that's about it.
yeah. All right. The next category is directing. Um, I'm kind of between a 0 and a 1 here.
Same.
Um, why don't we just keep going? We'll come back to directing because I don't feel like either of us feel too strongly about it, but we'll see how we're doing that with the
I don't
score
know that I've seen
overall.
another John Pasco movie, so
Yeah, I've seen Miss Congeniality too, which is not that good. But it's a pretty standard comedy. I think that he manages.
he's much more so a TV show director. So
Yeah, I think the movie manages well enough as it goes along. I don't know if I'd call it particularly good, so maybe I do say
yeah,
it's a 0 because of that. I guess, yeah, I would say it's 0 simply because I'm not going to call it bad, but I'm not going to call it good either,
yeah,
which on our scale puts
is
it at
not
0.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Acting. I'm kind of at a 1 with acting.
The children
Um,
actors kind of do okay,
yeah, like most
especially
of
for the
like the
90s.
yeah, like we said, Charlie, his character's kind of annoying, but it's not his fault. That's just the way that they directed him, honestly. Didn't but then I think the
The way
other,
he's it's the way he's written to me.
yeah, it's the other elf children that I think they do good job with the performances. I think Tim Allen, this is probably one of his stronger presences on screen, like as a screen performer.
Yeah.
And I think he works well in this role. I think that Judge Reinhold, as much as that character I don't like very much, like as he's written, I think Judge Reinhold is honestly pretty good in this movie too, as well as I can't think of the woman's name who plays his
I wouldn't
wife, but
say I actually wouldn't say I don't know how you feel on this movie, but I would say Galaxy Quest is Tim Allen's best.
oh yeah, 100%. I'm
Yeah.
right there with you. Galaxy Quest is absolutely Tim Allen's best. But this is, as far as Tim Allen led films go, which there's not a lot of very good ones. This one, I think his presence does add to it. So I do think that he's giving a good performance here. Like you said, specifically in the latter half of the movie, when everything starts to fall apart for me, he kind of keeps it together a bit.
True.
So I'm leaning towards a 1 with the acting.
Yeah, I think he's okay throughout. I think it's the pacing of the movie that kind of
Yeah.
ruins that style or that effect on the plot. But
Yeah.
yeah, I guess everyone's doing a fine job. So a 1 is
Yeah.
warranted.
Let's see. Visuals. Okay. I think this movie, like I said, nails that Christmas aesthetic. And I kind of like the 90s visual sensibility of comedies. They don't look as like clean and like crystal clear as they do now because it's not shot digitally in the same way, but there is some charm in its visual presentation.
Yeah.
However, there
That
are also
CGI is god awful.
that CGI does not hold up. Not that it completely
I don't think
ruins
it
the
did.
movie.
I gotta say, saw it when I was a kid. I don't think it held up then either.
Yeah, I don't think it ever really looked good. I
No.
remember thinking as a kid that it didn't look good either.
And I looked it up.
Um,
Jurassic Park had a $63 million budget, so
oh my gosh, yeah. It like
it's not
if you
far
can't
enough. It was a
if you
hundred. If it
can't
was
pull
130
off,
million, then yeah,
yeah,
it would be fine for the time. But I think I could point to many movies that look better with lower budgets.
I think so
And
too.
this is not far off from like the Star Wars prequels, which yeah, you can
Right.
say what you want about it, but the visuals are some of the best parts of those movies.
Yeah, even when they don't hold up, specifically
No,
Phantom Menace doesn't hold up as well, but it was so revolutionary
yeah,
that you have to give it that pass because it was doing so many different things. So yeah, something
because
like
George
this.
Lucas was doing that mold together, combining together the practical and CGI for the
Yeah,
time. But I
yeah,
mean,
Yeah, I'm gonna punch in a 0 for this for the
Yeah, I
visuals
think
on
that's
this
a
one.
fair thing. I think again, this movie would be a lot better if it continued the North Pole plot.
Yeah.
And it would look a lot better and it would have a better world and it
Well,
probably would be paced a lot better.
think of like Ron Howard's Grinch film. Whatever you think about that film,
It looks pretty
the
good.
world that they made is incredible.
Yeah.
Whoville, those sets, that's such a great world that they made.
Yep.
And I kind of wish that this movie had a little bit more of that kind of magic in it, in its actual world stuff that it was doing. But as far as the North Pole goes, you just see the workshop briefly. So
Pretty much, yeah.
yeah, and some bad CGI landscape shots.
Yeah.
So
Which Elf did a lot better too.
right, because Elf leaned into like the sensibilities of those old
Yeah, like the
stop motion
yeah.
claymation movies.
Yep.
So
Thanks, Mr. Narwhal.
right, which has its own charm to it. So
Yeah.
yeah, all right, editing's a 0 again. I think kind of in the same realm of
I think there are way too
directing.
many weird shots like put together. I think
Yeah.
that also affects the pacing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Is and this is especially during the dramatic moments. There are like weird shots put together. And also, yeah, I can't say that the entirety of the first Christmas Eve was edited well
Yeah,
with regards to the sleigh and them going house to house kind of thing.
yeah, it's kind of that thing where it's like this isn't like bad editing necessarily, but it's also not good editing. It's just
No.
fine. It's fine. So
Yeah.
that on our scale, that puts it at a 0. All right, sound.
For sound, I'm going to argue for a 1 because the music's good, but
Yeah,
also
same.
I have to take into account the sound effects are terrible.
Yes,
Sound effects are
apparently,
awful.
apparently the reindeer sound effects are from the video game Doom.
All right. I want to give it a 2 now. That's hilarious.
Yeah, because Doom came out in '93
Yeah.
and had, you know, if you've ever played Doom, you get kind of those weird like kind of sound effects and
Those
stuff
like
in there.
bit crushed thing sounding
Yeah, and
things.
like the reindeer in this movie sound super weird. Like I don't know why they made him sound like that.
Yo, now I want the
So,
Doomslayer as Santa. You know he could take Tim Allen in a fight.
absolutely. Oh, well, easily. Come on. Unless you get the Tijuana Lightyear Alan.
Tijuana Lightyear.
Then maybe
Tim,
maybe
the
Alan
Tijuana
wins.
Lightyear Allen is going to be his name from now on. When we do Galaxy Quest and Toy Story, we're going to refer to him as that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think the sound does a lot in this movie to kind of build on the Christmas setting, even more so than the visuals necessarily.
Yeah.
So
I think a 1 is fine.
yeah, same. Genre, Christmas is kind of the genre, Christmas comedy. Like I said while we were talking about in the main discussion, I think if you're just watching this because you like the Christmas aesthetics, Christmas sensibilities, you're watching this because you want to watch a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
I think it's good for that. I'm not going to say it's one of the best Christmas movies ever by any stretch.
No, because there's a handful. Yeah.
There's a handful of truly great Christmas movies.
Gonna be
One
honest.
of them, yeah.
You talked about how The Grinch Stole Christmas. It's probably a better Christmas movie than this one.
I like it better than this.
Yeah.
I have a soft spot for that movie, even though it has its definitive.
It's mostly Jim
issues.
Carrey for me. It's
But yeah.
I still I still contend it's a pretty rough movie, but yeah, I think Jim Carrey elevates it as a Christmas movie.
My major issue with that movie is that Ron Howard has that camera on a sway the whole time.
Oh, he does.
And I don't get motion sickness, but I get a little nauseous watching that movie.
Yeah.
So I like that movie more than I think the average person does. But I also like
In spite
can't
of your
watch it
eyes.
fully, you know? Yeah, exactly. That's my only real major issue with that movie. But yeah, I don't think that this is one of the best Christmas movies, but
I think a 1
that
is warranted.
it does the genre fine because it's a genre with a low bar, honestly.
Yeah, just like slasher
So,
movies to us.
yeah. Let's see. And impact. A reluctant 2 is what I say this impact is, honestly.
Yeah.
It has stayed in the cultural zeitgeist. It has spawned multiple sequels that have all been financially successful. This was a massive hit when it came out, and it still has a series running on a 30-year-old franchise. I mean, I can't say anything other than this is a 2, you know? For
I was probably more towards a one, but I think that's because the entire franchise, because I saw all of them and then forgot about them. I
Yeah,
didn't really
I
care about them.
honestly, I think if you go into the sequels, they're not going to be a two for impact, but this one just being the thing that kind of set it off, and still the most successful entry in the franchise.
Fair. Oh,
Um,
just like a Friday the 13th. Yes, it's a two,
right,
but like
right.
probably probably after a few of them, probably not even a one.
Yeah, like second one probably is still a one. The third one definitely not anything because that movie was so bad it killed the franchise until they brought it back for the Disney Plus show.
Which is the
Like that
hilarious sentence. It killed the franchise, but not really.
that movie grossed $100 million more than its budget was, which its budget was only like 16 million on that one. They reduced the budget quite a bit, which shows honestly that movie's pretty rough.
Yeah, no, dude,
But
this franchise
it's
right here grossed 500 million.
right. It's yeah. That third movie still grossed $117 million at the box office. You know,
Yeah.
like on a movie that costs that little, like that's like horror movie numbers kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I yeah, people don't remember it. People didn't like it. People weren't wanting a fourth one. I'm sure that they were smart for not doing a fourth one when that time would have been appropriate based on the box office because of the declining quality. So,
Well, a
but yeah,
declining box office usually means that they'll stop after a while. It's like Blade.
right, right,
Blade Trinity still made numbers, but
yeah,
it was much lower than the other two, and it's also a rated R movie.
yeah.
There's only so many times you can pump out a non-niche rated R movie and for a franchise and expect numbers to grow or even like not decline.
Yeah, weird tangent, but they're making another Maleficent movie. Don't ask me why. Um, but I mean, that first one made over 700 million, which is
Yeah, and I went to
crazy.
go see it in theaters.
I did too. It's not good.
Teenage girlfriends, man, can't trust them.
And then the second one came out. It still made money, but like it made like 400 million in like 2019. So it's so like I'm like that's a huge decline and it was liked what less critically. So I don't know why that they're like, let's make a third one.
It's
But
Disney. They'll take it they'll take it on the chin.
I don't know. That one feels like it's not going to make money like the other ones unless they like really cut the budget. But
Yeah, if you're wondering why Disney is not making a lot of good decisions lately, I can point to quite a few examples.
yeah, I mean with the whole leadership change that they had once the Bob Chapek took over, this is a whole inside industry stuff. But
Yeah.
with the whole Bob Chapek thing, a lot of people like and then Bob Iger came back and took over. It has been controversial lately because of statements made during the strike. Obviously, he was a studio head, so that's the side that he was representing there. Um, but this Iger, for all of his flaws in recent statements and even past statements, he's been a good executive in terms of the kind of content that they put out. But Chapek, when he was kind of restructured things, that's when we got that kind of super influx on like Marvel stuff, on Disney Plus stuff. And that's why he was fired. They paid him like $30 million to fire him, basically, to break contract. And they brought back Iger. And we're still not going to feel the impact of Iger coming back until 2 or 3
A
more
few
years from
years,
now.
yeah.
Because that's just how things work.
It's so weird. It's like imagine Pope Benedict came back a few years after Francis took over.
Right, right.
It feels so weird. Like the Cardinals pushing out Francis and then bringing back a pope that resigned. It just doesn't
Yeah,
make
right.
sense.
Right. So yeah, it's
Move
just kind
on.
of it's a weird time for Disney, but like this is a weird move because that's a Bob Iger decision to make Maleficent 3, and I'm like,
Ugh.
what? Why are you making this decision? You're supposed to be the better one. So I don't know. I don't know. We'll see if things actually improve or not.
You're supposed to
But
make Cars 4 where Mater takes on the KGB. Jeez.
yes, well, they are making Toy Story 5 and Frozen 3 and 4.
Ah.
But those movies are all $1 billion movies for like those franchises are each one that comes out makes $1 billion. So from a financial perspective, that one makes sense. Even if you're like, I don't want them to keep trying this, but I really like Toy
Well,
Story
they'll
4.
no.
So.
The thing is, they'll keep. I really didn't like it. The thing is, why do you keep bringing back? You're bringing it back for money, and the
Right.
problem with that is the second that people stop going to it and stop liking it, is going to be not a problem for you. You'll just take it on the chin, move along. But the people who like those franchises aren't going to like those franchises anymore.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what's happening with Star
So
Wars
from a
right now.
consumer perspective, which is what I'm fighting from, I hate it.
Right. I agree. I feel like if something ends well, let it end well.
Toy
Like,
Story
I
3
know
was a
that,
perfect ending.
yeah, like I don't want to see any more live action Lord of the Rings films.
Nope.
They are making an anime Lord of the Rings film called Ride of the Rohirrim, which is supposed to come out either next year or the year after, which great. That's awesome. Make a really cool anime Lord of the Rings film that's really not connected much to anything going on. Absolutely all for that. Please do not try to make some like years later sequel pickup of Lord of the
Shh.
Rings.
Don't give Amazon ideas.
Well, Amazon doesn't have the rights to that. Amazon
No,
only
I
has the
know,
rights
but
for like specific appendices.
oh,
um,
man, Rings of Power. The thing is,
Rings of Power is a show that I don't mind, but it doesn't live up to its
the thing
potential.
is,
I don't
I've
think.
I've heard that House of the Dragon was pretty good compared to Game of Thrones. So that's the difference.
I,
When
I, I'll be controversial here. I think House of the Dragon sucks.
Well, here's the thing. I only watched season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones, so I only
Well,
know
of
the
course,
bad parts.
yeah.
So,
Game of Thrones was on a downward trajectory from about season 5, and
yeah.
like storytelling wise, it still had massive production that led to some incredible episodes, but the storytelling was on a decline
It
for a
might it
while.
might also be the fact that people weren't disappointed by House of the Dragon when they completely expected to be.
Yeah, everybody seemed to love House of the Dragon, and so I'm in the vast minority when
I
I
didn't
just I
I didn't
didn't
expect much
care.
from Rings of Power and I was still disappointed.
Yeah. I was not expecting a lot from Rings of Power, and I was pleasantly surprised by certain things. Whereas House of the Dragon was one that I was like, maybe they can get it back on track with this property. It's still incredible production, so it's worth checking out for that reason. There's still incredible performances in it, all of that stuff. However, the storytelling in it for me just completely falls flat because I just did not care. It jumps around in time way too much, and I could not get attached to any of the characters in it. And I'm like, why you keep going with all this incest, honestly?
You know, I
Like,
I think that's why I didn't bother watching Game of Thrones because I didn't really like high fantasy is hit or miss for me. I
yeah,
don't like Magic the Gathering. I don't really like Dungeons and Dragons all that much, but I love Lord of the Rings. And I think it's
yeah,
purely based on an interesting story to me that has well written characters
yeah,
and good characterization along 3 movies, and that's it.
yeah.
You don't need more.
I do like high fantasy, but I don't think that there are a lot of great things out in visual mediums for it, you know. I think the Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out earlier this year was actually a ton of fun. It's very lighthearted. It kind of reminds me of like Marvel movies back, you know, when Marvel movies were pretty much well liked by everybody. So
Also,
in that kind of range of things.
Lord of the
But
Rings was a once in a lifetime opportunity that
absolutely.
grossed multiple billions of dollars, won a dozen some odd Academy Awards, and also captivated the world for 3 years.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a big side tangent that we just had about
that's fine.
franchises and stuff. But that puts the score for the Santa Claus at, let's see, six,
6. Yeah.
6 out of 10.
Oh, another Crash.
Well, this
Three.
that's higher than Crash.
No, that is higher than Crash. Crash was
That's
3 out
twice
of
what we
20.
gave
Yeah.
Crash. Yeah.
Uh,
So
3 out of 10.
yeah. So yeah. Not once again. It's just not one that I think either of us really super vibe with. It's just not our thing. But if you like this kind of thing, it's totally fine. Like this movie's to me totally average. And if that Christmas stuff kind of gives you a boost, if you're a big Tim Allen fan,
I'm sorry. I prefer my comedic actors non-drug smuggling.
yeah, if you prefer the non-drug
I prefer
smuggling
a
comedic
different
actors,
Buzz.
yeah, but if this movie has things that you already are prone to like, then you're like this movie just fine. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
It's the
with
way I
it.
described it at the beginning. It's fine.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's fine. So yeah, but what do we have next week, Kyle?
So next week you will notice if you look at the schedule is going to be our first episode of 2024.
Oh, look at that.
And I would like to kick that off by remembering that the Artemis program from NASA is due to send a space crew of 4 to orbit the moon for the first time since 1972.
Oh, wow.
So we are going to take a look at a movie covering the last spacecraft to orbit around the moon, but not land on it. We are going to be looking at Apollo 13.
Nice. I actually watched this for the first time this year.
Nice.
So, but yeah.
We talked about Ron Howard, so I didn't try to give it away.
Yeah, no, we did talk about Ron Howard. Ron Howard, one of the bigger hit or miss guys, but
this is definitely his biggest hit.
This is definitely one of his best films for sure. Because he has some really great films that he's made. My personal favorite of his is actually Parenthood. Still to this day, I think that movie is great.
The sequel to Boyhood.
The inspiration, but really it's the inspiration for the show Parenthood, which was very long running. So
he also made Rush, which has been forgotten about, but I really like that movie.
Rush is great. I like that movie a lot too.
Daniel Bruhl needs to be in more things.
Absolutely. He's right now kind of just been locked into Marvel stuff where he's just underused. So, but yeah, so I guess, next week we'll be talking about Apollo 13 to kick off the new year. So that'll do it for this week on Great American Movie Review. Thanks for joining us. If you prefer us in an audio format, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also check us out on social media, Letterboxd and Instagram. You can find us at Gamer, G-A-M-R Podcast. And that'll do it for this week at Great American Movie Reviews. We'll see you at the movie.
Happy New Year, everyone.